I'm Julie Zenner along with Dennis Anderson, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We'll talk with staff members of 2 local agencies dedicated to helping victims and their families.
The Itasca Economic Development Corporation has secured funding for a new business incubator and is hosting an economic summit next week.
And Danielle Kaeding from Wisconsin Public Radio is our guest on Voices of the Region.
Those stories and more coming up on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. And Denny, this might be the last decent weekend to finish up all those outdoor chores.
The last forecast I saw was for nothing but sunshine all weekend long. Time to get yard work done, winterize the cabin, all sorts of things.
Button everything down.
I think so.
All right, sounds good.
Very good. Thank you very much, Julie. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz took action today to relieve overcrowding at hospitals crushed by COVID cases. The governor put the Minnesota National Guard on alert to provide staffing support at long-term care facilities. He also announced steps to expand rapid testing sites in the state, with the National Guard ramping up that effort. The governor also urged the state legislature to step in and take action to help curb the COVID-19 pandemic.
On Thursday, the governor visited Duluth to kick off a statewide local jobs and projects tour. Governor Walz joined local officials for a news conference highlighting infrastructure improvements on the Duluth waterfront. The Minnesota legislature will consider billions of dollars in potential projects in its 2022 capital investment bonding bill.
St. Luke's and Gateway Clinic are partnering to open a new surgery center in Moose Lake. The Northern Lake Surgery Center will be located in the former Shopko building in Moose Lake. The multi-million-dollar facility will provide numerous outpatient surgery options and is expected to open next summer.
And the Lake Superior Zoo will host its annual Boo at the Zoo beginning this weekend. The family-friendly event features multiple trick-or-treat stations, games, food trucks, and fun activities. Boo at the Zoo will be held on October 16th, 23rd, and 30th. You can find out more on the Lake Superior Zoo website.
The statistics regarding domestic violence in America are staggering. Every day, almost 20 people a minute are physically abused by someone close to them. In Minnesota, 1 out of every 3 homeless women were homeless because of domestic violence. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, a time to mourn the victims and to help lift up the survivors. And so joining us now with more is Jackie Christensen, Community Engagement Coordinator with Safe Haven Shelter and Resource Center. And Deanna Rader is a legal advocate with the American Indian Community Housing Organization. Ladies, thank you both very much for being here tonight. Is there any, and maybe we could start with you, Deanna, any correlation between the lockdown caused by COVID and domestic violence? Are we noticing any kind of a tie between the two?
There is a really big connection. So when the first stay-at-home order started, we had to go, or with COVID in general, we actually had to go to half capacity, and we are a 10-bed shelter, and so that put us at 5. And then we had to turn away more women and families who are fleeing domestic violence. So it actually showed there was more of an increase of turnaway.
Oh, really?
Because of with the pandemic, and which is really unfortunate because there's such a need for bed space, and we were already such a small space in the first place,
Sure.
And then we had to even eliminate more space because of the pandemic.
How do you actually define domestic violence? Does it always include physical violence, or are there shades, or along a spectrum?
Yeah, absolutely. We typically define domestic violence as one partner maintaining power and control over another partner. And that could be with physical violence, that could be with emotional abuse, put downs, gaslighting, that could be, what we know is that 99% of survivors experience some sort of economic or financial abuse, preventing somebody from having a job or controlling their finances, along with using children and dependents and pets as objects of control.
Jackie, I would imagine because there is so much domestic violence in the state of Minnesota even, Can you tell us a little bit about how many women in Minnesota may lose their lives because of domestic violence? I'm sure that's an issue here in the state, is it not?
Yeah, our statewide coalition does a really great job of honoring the lives of those who have lost to domestic violence. And just today, we got notification of the 23rd victim just in this year in the state of Minnesota. And those are 23 victims that have been identified as victims of homicide related to domestic violence. Who knows how many victims that we're just not aware of.
Mm-hmm. Especially with the overlap, and we were just talking about this earlier, a lot of people who know the movement or may or may not know with the missing and murdered Indigenous women, a lot of them get, a lot of Native women, girls in Two-Spirit get not accounted for. So I'm sure the numbers would be a lot higher if there was an accurate representation of all victims of domestic violence.
Mm-hmm. And we think of domestic violence more often as having women as the victim, but things can be flipped around sometimes, can't they?
Yeah, I think the nationwide statistics are 1 in 3 women will experience, 1 in 7 men, and then half of transgender individuals will experience domestic violence at some point in their lifetime. So it truly is a cause that impacts everyone, no matter their socioeconomic status, right, where they live, how they live. Anyone can be a victim and or a perpetrator of that violence.
And then do your organizations deal with support services for men or for transgender people who might be in that sort of a victim state?
We work with all because we know domestic violence doesn't discriminate on your gender or race, so we work with all victims of domestic violence. If you're going to come forward and you would like help or services, we will be more than happy to work with you.
And Deanna, I believe one of your services is legal advocacy. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So I primarily do order for protections, harassment restraining orders. I'm anytime there's a domestic, I'm one of the individuals that gets followed up with. Or I follow up with the victim who's been identified and check in, see if they need any supportive services, because charges don't always happen. And sometimes they may just want that sense of protection, and so they'll seek out an order for protection. And then if not having an order for protection, I do provide support with the criminal and legal, civil justice system, because they're so complex and so overwhelming. And it's more of, I'm just like kind of like their right-hand gal. If they need some supporting, I'm there for them. Wherever they're at, I meet them at their level.
When a woman comes into a shelter, are police automatically notified?
No, it is completely confidential. Working with our services, they're protected under the Violence Against Women Act, so working with us is completely confidential. We do not disclose unless they want us to disclose on their behalf.
Understandable.
Mm-hmm. And what are the services that Safe Haven offers?
Yeah, so Safe Haven, we have legal advocates just like Deanna at our agency as well, so working with that. We're a larger shelter, and I think it's important to note that Safe Haven and Daubin-Nugent are the furthest north shelters in our state. So we have a 39-bed shelter, so it's a little bit larger. And so we provide everybody with all their basic needs that they need when they come into shelter. So all their meals, hygiene products. If they come in with just the clothes on their back, we'll help provide a little bit more, as well as our public-facing location, our resource center downtown on First Street, will also help with self-sufficiency. So helping survivors, safety is just one very small piece in the puzzle to rebuilding their lives. So helping fulfill those goals.
Many abused women have children. Is there space at either one of your organizations for children, and how are they cared for?
So with going back to when you mentioned about the COVID-19 pandemic, we actually had to close down our shelter, like the physical space, because we were community-based, and we had to relocate to an off-site area. And it actually was kind of a blessing in disguise, because even though our capacity is like for 5, we can take those like 5, but if they have children with them, we're able to take their children too. And so that's been the space that we're at now until we have our new shelter. We've been able to take any kiddos that they may have with them.
Yeah, and we accept any kids into shelter. And then we also have a youth advocate who works with youth who have lived in homes with violence to help kind of continue that relationship. So even when they're out of shelter, they might still form a relationship with that individual to have another responsible adult to look up to. Yeah.
A lot of people who are in abusive relationships hesitate to talk to friends or family members or coworkers about it. Are there some warning signs that might help people recognize if somebody that's in their life might be in a situation where maybe they need some help?
Yeah, I think one of those big warning signs is that shift in behaviors and moods. We often hear from people that it'll be this person used to always come to happy hour, and now they have an excuse as to why they can't come out anymore, right? Or that person that was always faithful to be in this pew at church doesn't seem to be there anymore. And so that's one of those things. I think a lot of times we think of like physical signs of looking for bruises and things like that, but that's not always the case, right? Sometimes it's just the shift in how they talk about their partner in conversation.
And are there ways to approach a conversation in terms of trying to feel out if somebody needs help, or are there things that you definitely shouldn't say or shouldn't do?
I would say the biggest thing, if you know someone who may be experiencing domestic violence, is just reminding them that you're there for them. And I grew up in a household where there was domestic violence. I watched my mom experience it, and I knew telling her like this is wrong, like let's leave, that it happened. It did the exact opposite.
Sure.
And sometimes I think that can even push people further away. But I think letting them know what resources there are and reminding that you'll always be there for them, I think that's going to be a big one.
So how can the public get involved?
So Dabanugan actually has an event at the end of the month, which is a great opportunity to just come out and learn about our community resources. What date is that again?
October 27th. It's on a Wednesday from 3 to 5. We're going to have a solidarity shawls dance, and we'll have other resources there.
Sure.
And it's because it's also, like I mentioned earlier, there's so much overlap with the domestic violence and the MMIW that there's intersectionality, and so we're.
And with that, we have to wrap it up. Thank you both for being here. Jackie and Deanna, thank you so much.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having
Right.
us.
Thank you. It's time now for Voices of the Region. Each week we hear from a journalist covering stories of interest in the Northland. This week, Wisconsin Public Radio reporter Danielle Kaeding is our guest.
Researchers and state officials confirmed that there was toxic blue-green algae that was found in Lake Superior waters as a result of a recent bloom in September that formed at a beach in the Duluth Superior Harbor at Barker's Island Beach. And officials are cautioning that this is quite different from finding the discovery of toxins in this inlet than it would be out on the open lake, because it's relatively shallow and a protected area that really doesn't see the same kind of dynamics that you would see out on the open waters. The discovery is a concerning progression for researchers in blooms that have been observed on Lake Superior, because you can't say that you haven't seen this anymore. Now we have seen it in the waters of Lake Superior, albeit in a very different situation. And so researchers and state environmental regulators are saying it's something to be concerned about. It's something to keep an eye on. But again, very different from what we would expect to see out on Lake Superior, although Lake Superior is one of the fastest warming lakes in the world. And so as conditions are continuing to change, as we see higher temperatures that lead to warmer waters on the lake, it's something that we definitely need to be monitoring and doing further research on. This is an effort that Northland College and state and federal and local partners have been working on for years, really to essentially slow the flow of runoff into the Shawamagan Bay. And if you remember, several years ago, we had flooding over Father's Day weekend in 2018 that really carved a hole through a major highway here in northwestern Wisconsin, US Highway 2. They saw disruptions in travel for months because we saw that flooding send essentially 3 times the amount of sediment that flows each year into the Shawamagan Bay just in that one event. Around 45,000 tons of sediment surged downstream with that flood. This project that they are wrapping up is a $320,000 restoration project funded through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which is a federal Great Lakes cleanup program. And it basically aims to prevent eroding bluffs from sending around 5,600 tons of sediment each year downstream into the bay. They're doing that by installing layers of logs into the stream bed, which are cabled together near the base of eroding bluffs along Fish Creek. And those logs are designed to keep the creek from migrating towards its banks while also serving as fish habitat. And so the creek is also being redirected to follow its original path that it had prior to the flood. And so they expect that this project would actually hold up in the rate, or would actually hold up in the face of other intense storms because of some of the infrastructure improvements that have been made to US Highway 2. They've got a bridge there now where before they had a box culvert, and essentially that flood just tore out the road around it. The DNR basically rejected its own policy setting board, the Natural Resources Board, and the quota that it set, which more than doubled the amount of wolves that could be harvested this fall. And so the DNR basically cut that in half back to their original recommendation of 130 wolves for this fall. And they say that they have the authority to do that under state law and make the final call on the wolf hunt. And this has caused a lot of debate. There's a power struggle that's been going on right now between the Wisconsin DNR under Governor Tony Evers' administration and the conservative majority of the Wisconsin Natural Resources Board, who has sought these higher quotas that they say are in line with the state's existing wolf management plan, which critics have called into question because they don't feel it's based on sound science and that it hasn't been updated in about 2 decades. There are 2 separate lawsuits seeking to shut down the wolf hunt in Wisconsin this fall, one filed by animal protection and wildlife advocacy groups, another filed by tribes who say that the February hunt was conducted in a manner that violated their treaty rights and that the Natural Resources Board intentionally set a quota knowing that they would deprive the tribes of their rights under treaty to half that quota or up to half of that quota. And so now in the final days of this month, we're set to see a hearing in the tribes case on October 29th. And that could potentially shift where things go from here with the hunt on November 6th, depending on what the court rules, whether they rule in favor of the tribe or allow the hunt to move forward.
Itasca Economic Development Corporation this week unveiled plans to create a space where entrepreneurs can develop their big ideas. With over $1 million in grant funding, Itasca Development will renovate a 16,500 square foot facility. Now, earlier today, Almanac North producer Greg Grell spoke with the Development Corporation's president about the new building and an economic summit in Itasca County next week.
It's called The Forge, where ideas take shape. We are so excited about this opportunity. IEDC has been doing economic development in this community for about 40 years. We've done small business development, attraction, lots of different opportunities to work in broadband and really try to accelerate rural economic development. But most recently, we've been looking at a building that we owned. It has historically been called the Airport Road building, super catchy since it resides on Airport Road. But that building has a tenant in one side and the other side recently became vacant. And so we just talked about bootstrapping and putting together a partnership with the college workforce development, and us doing entrepreneurship and innovation work and create a combination incubator maker space that would be a home of education, training, and innovation and entrepreneurship. And so as we talked about this, in the middle of these conversations with all these partners, the RISE grant came front and center from the USDA. And so we thought, well, let's take a shot at this. And we brought together all these partners and went after that RISE grant in just a matter of weeks. We wrote that grant. And we also went out and raised other funds. So we had that grant for 750,000, 50,000 from the Arrowhead Intelligent Region, our county, Itasca County, chipped in, as well as Itasca Community College. So lots of collaborators, lots of partners to really bring this to fruition.
And is there a pretty high demand for this type of facility in Itasca County? Do you have a lot of people that are really looking forward to it?
We believe we do. So most recently, IEDC was designated as the rural hub for Launch Minnesota. So it's a real effort to do outreach and work with entrepreneurs and innovators. We started our brand Innovate 218 just earlier this year. So right around the end of the first quarter, we started to launch Innovate 218 and work with those entrepreneurs. We have a lean startup model of training that's done with a cohort and a partner called ILT Academy. So we're reaching those people right now. We're trying to build the network and really try to find the platform that they need to really accelerate their growth of their business. So we believe they're there. It's a challenge finding them, right? So we have to get the word out, but we know that we can help them. And because we're doing this collaboratively, we know that the students are there from ICC that need to have access to the space and have access to that CNC machine or that welding equipment that they wouldn't otherwise have access to.
And elaborate a little bit more on that partnership. That was going to be my next question with the community colleges involved. That should be a real great opportunity for them.
Oh, it's huge. It really is, because they have, the challenge is they have a limited space available for them. And so that's why we started having the conversations in the first place, was how can we try to put a space together that we can both use so it has more sustainability, right? Because when you're rural, trying to do something like this on your own sometimes has a very short lifespan because there's not enough money to go around. So by bringing these partners to the table, we really built in long-term sustainability and the knowledge and know-how, right? So let's say my team, we work with small businesses. We know the finances really well. We can write some grants. We can lead in this community, but we're not educators, right? We're not welders. And so by having the partnership with education and with the NemoJet, the workforce development crew, they have the trainers already. They have the educators. And so they bring so much value to this space, because now not only do we have entrepreneurs and innovators in that space, but we have students and we have teachers and we have trainers and folks that can really help everyone use this equipment and develop their ideas.
Now, next week, tomorrow, you are hosting the Itasca Development Summit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, IEDC really believes that we're at a pinnacle moment. So if you don't know, our region is home to one of the last coal-fired power plants in the state of Minnesota, the Boswell Energy Center. Our partnership with Minnesota Power has been significant, and they really believe in trying to diversify our region beyond the Boswell Energy Center. Because there is a lot of pushback on how long they're going to be around. We're working within a time frame to really try to find new opportunities for our community, whether it's new business opportunities, entrepreneurship opportunities, training and education, community development. It's really all of those things in one bucket. And so we decided to put on the summit where we could invite both the usual, as I call them, suspects, people like myself and community leaders that do a lot of these summits, and some of the unusual suspects that aren't always at the table and their voice is not heard. And so by bringing these different community members together, we really hope to hear from people, give them ideas, right? So part of the session is focused on hearing from inspirational speakers, topics around entrepreneurship, topics around housing and workforce development and tourism, all these really important critical pieces of our region. And then at the end of each day, there's what's called a facilitated work session, where all of those people will come together in a space and start to talk about, okay, what did you take away from this information? What can we do? And how can we do that? How do we make these things happen? So, a lot of people have conferences and summits, and it's great, and I love that. But we wanted to go in with a purpose of coming out of this summit with real ideas and people that were willing to step up and take part in putting those ideas into action.
Is there any more room at the summit? Could people still participate if they wish, and give us the details?
Well, the great news is, so our summit is in person at Sugar Lake Lodge over 2 days. The in-person piece is pretty full. Obviously, we're trying to be really safe. But the one thing that we've done is we've put everything on Zoom live and recorded. So all you need to do is go to IEDC's website, itascadv.org, and click on the summit, and every link to every session will be available on there, and you can watch any of those live, or again, go back later and find the recorded version. The only thing that won't be available is the facilitated work sessions, because we don't want people to think they're being recorded. We want them to be candid and open about what they're thinking about problem solving here in Itasca County. So we encourage anyone to attend. I can tell you there's a lot of really amazing speakers coming in. We have Nick Tassler, who's a national inspirational speaker about change management, and Katie Boone coming in, who's transformational and thinking about our future as a community and how we can be more diverse and more welcoming. And then lots of other speakers to kind of talk about those other industries I mentioned earlier.
Well, Tamara Lowney, President of the Itasca County Economic Development Corporation, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Well, that's our time this week, but you can keep up with our latest posts by following Almanac North on Facebook and Twitter. Check out the WDSC website for program updates, news about the station and upcoming events, and download the PBS video app to watch your favorite PBS programs anytime you please. And Denny, I for one am looking forward to some sunny skies and getting outside this weekend.
You just reminded me. I have to mow the lawn now tomorrow.
What?
Yep.
Mowing
Then I put it in the
lawn?
mower away for the
I mowed
winter.
mine last week and
Did
I'm
you?
done. I put it away in the shed.
Tomorrow's it.
All right. Thanks to our guests and the crew here in the studio with Dennis Anderson. I'm Julie Zenner. We'll see you next time.